Hello everyone, today we are back with another solo challenge. This time we will be attempting to complete Pokemon Emerald with only a Lickitung. Lickitung is a normal type, which is nice because normal types are only weak to fighting. Normal types generally are able to learn a large variety of TMs, and Lickitung is no exception. It can learn powerful moves like Thunderbolt and Shadow Ball. It can even learn Surf, which will be useful for double battles. Lickitung's major issue is that his level up moveset is pretty bad, as he does not learn a stab move until level 23. For this run, I chose to replace Trico with Zangoose so that May will get the partial fighting type Blaziken. I actually lost a couple of times to the first required May fight. We were both the same level, but Scratch has 20 more base power than Lick, so where Torchic did slightly more damage than my Lick, and I ultimately lost a few times. The last attempt I was able to paralyze the Torchic with Lick, and got lucky because a couple of turns the Torchic was fully paralyzed. After a couple of minutes, I defeated the surprisingly difficult rival fight. I thought I was in the clear, but I kept losing to the first trainer on Route 102. He only has a level 5 Poochyena that resists my only attacking move, Lick. It also knows Howl, which raises his attack by one stage. The Poochyena kept setting up Howl and dealing massive damage while my Lick was doing nothing. Every attempt I also paralyzed the Poochyena, but it didn't matter since Lick did so little damage. I decided to waste all my PP so I could use Struggle. Struggle was a lot more powerful than Lick, and I had no issue taking out the Poochyena. I was able to take out the rest of the route without much issue. Fast forwarding to Rustbro, it was time to fight the first gym. I attempted to fight Roxanne at level 15 and failed miserably. I couldn't beat the first Geodude even though I was 3 levels lower. Lick did almost no damage and the Geodude eventually knocked me out. Lick is a physical move and Geodude's best stat is his physical defense. I need to level up a couple more levels so Lickitung can learn Knockoff, a special move that can take advantage of Geodude's poor special defense. With the new moveset, we should be able to beat Roxanne. Roxanne's Pokemon only know physical attacking moves, so my plan is to set up a few defense curls against the first Geodude to be able to survive longer. Now that I know Knockoff, the Geodude using defense curl is not an issue. 5 knockoffs later and I'm able to defeat the first Geodude. For the second Geodude, I had already set up defense curls, so I just used a few knockoffs and one Lick to knock out the Geodude. Last was Nosepass. She kept using Harden for the first few turns, so I was able to get off a few attacks without taking any damage. Then she started using Tackle, which didn't do much due to my increased defense. A few minutes later, and we were able to obtain our first gym badge. Not the most interesting fight, but we were able to merge with a victory nonetheless. I don't think I'm ready to fight Brawly at this point. I tried fighting some of the trainers in the gym and nearly lost. The trainers have lower levels than Brawly and only have one Pokemon, so I think it would be better to head to Slateport to gain some experience. Lickitung learned Stomp at level 23, and I want to learn that before the fight. At level 23 I challenged Brawly. He starts with Machop and I went straight for Stomp, which did way more than I was expecting. The Machop landed a critical hit Karate Chop that only did 38 damage. A couple more Stomps knocked out the first Machop. Next was Meditite, who got one shot by one Stomp. Finally was Makuhita. I went for Stomp and did more than half. The Makuhita used Bulk Up, which was concerning. I went for Stomp again and didn't knock out the Makuhita. I was prepared to lose to a +1 Vital Throw, but I got the flinch with Stomp. One more Stomp wins me the fight. Stomp has a 30% chance to flinch the opponent, so I got pretty lucky getting the flinch in that situation. The rival fight before Moss Deep Gym was next. First was Wingull, who was a one-shot with Stomp. Next was Combusken, the biggest threat on her team. The Combusken used Focus Energy while I went for Stomp. The following turn the Combusken used Double Kick, but he didn't land any critical hits. Another Stomp finished May's starter. Finally was Lombre, who was another one-shot with Stomp. A pretty easy fight. I was expecting to have a couple of fails against the Combusken. Then I tried to battle Watson. Voltorb used Self-Destruct and did minimal damage. Electric was a one-shot with Stomp, but Magneton followed. Stomp barely does any damage to Magneton due to Magneton being a Steel type. I tried 3 times but lost every attempt to the Magneton. One attempt I tried teaching Lickitung Rock Smash for super effective damage, but with only a base power of 20, I still failed. I can't get the Dig TM until after the gym, so I think my only option is to level up a bit. I tried again at level 31 and got to the Magneton without much trouble. My Stomp was doing more than before, but it still was not doing enough damage. Both Shockwave and Sonic Boom did a consistent 20 damage, which definitely outpaced my damage output. I was still unable to get past this Magneton. I tried teaching Lickitung Rollout to increase my damage, and I was able to knock out the Magneton a couple of times, but I was very weak when his Ace came out, and the Manectric easily finished me off. I tried many more times, but couldn't get close to beating the Manectric. I had to grind once again to hopefully deal with the Magneton without taking so much damage. At level 35 I gave the fight another shot. Voltorb and Electric were simple enough, but the real test was next. Against Magneton, I used Stomp and did minimal damage while the Magneton paralyzed me. The following turn I went for another Stomp, but was fully paralyzed. Magneton used Shockwave and did 17 damage. I figured I had lost at this point, so I just went for another Stomp and got the Magneton into yellow. I needed to land 2 more Stomps to knock out the Magneton. I went for another Stomp, but I got a critical hit and knocked the Magneton out. I made it to Manectric with 52 HP, which is much better than previous attempts. The Manectric went for Howl and I used Stomp. The Stomp landed and I got another critical hit and one-shot the Manectric. The luck on that attempt was incredible. Not only did I get 2 consecutive critical hits, but I also only got fully paralyzed 1 time that entire fight. After countless attempts, we finally get the 3rd gym badge and can proceed with the story. Philandry started with Numel, who is no match for 1 Stomp. Next was Slugma, who was also a one-shot with Stomp. I didn't think Camerupt would be a one-shot with Stomp, but I went for it anyways and landed a critical hit. I'm pretty sure that crit mattered. Finally was the physically defensive Torkoal. I started with Stomp and landed another critical hit and flinched the Torkoal. The following turn I nearly knocked the Torkoal out, and the Torkoal used Attract. Lickitung's ability counters Attract, so the move failed. I used a couple more Stomps to get the Torkoal to yellow HP while the Torkoal used Sunny Day. Sunny Day powers up Overheat, so I was worried that Overheat might one-shot my Lickitung. At this point I did not want to use another Stomp because it would put the Torkoal into Hyper Potion range. I used 2 licks to lower the Torkoal to a range that Stomp will knock it out. The Torkoal used Body Slam instead of Overheat, effectively wasting the Sunny Day. 1 more Stomp and I get the 4th gym badge. A much easier fight than Watson. Next was Norman and he led with Spinda. I went for a Stomp and landed the flinch on the first turn. Norman wastes his Hyper Potion and 2 more Stomps finishes the Spinda off. I was worried about getting confused with Teeter Dance, so that was a lucky flinch. Next was Slacking. I figured that the Slacking would use counter since I'm a normal type, so every turn that the Slacking would attack, I would use either Knockoff or Supersonic. Knockoff is a special move and Supersonic doesn't deal any damage, so they both cause counter to fail. During the turns that the Slacking is loafing around, I went for Stomp to deal more damage. Once the Slacking was in the red, I used a final Stomp to knock the Slacking out. Vigoroth fell to 2 Stomps, but put me into yellow HP with Facade. Finally was Lanoon. He went for Facade, which did about 20 damage, while I did Stomp, that did more than half. 1 more attack and I win the fight. The following turn, the Lanoon used Headbutt and I flinched. I thought I lost the fight after the flinch. The Lanoon used Slash, but I lived with 4 HP. My Stomp landed and knocked out the Lanoon. That fight was super close. Before the May fight, I taught Lickitung Surf. I never use Lick anymore, and the 20 power is not great for this point in the game. She started with Pelipper and I went for Stomp. The Stomp landed and flinched the Pelipper. 1 more Stomp finished the Pelipper off. Next was Combuskin, and I used a newly learned Surf to one-shot the Combuskin. Finally was Lombre, who is a one-shot to Stomp. The Fortune Gym Leader started with Swablu, who fell to 1 Stomp. Next was Tropius. I went for another Stomp and did about half. The Tropius used Sunny Day. The following turn the Tropius was faster due to his Chlorophyll ability and landed a Solar Beam that barely did any damage. My Stomp knocked it out. Pelipper was next, and it fell to 2 Stomps. For Skarmory I went for Surf, and did about half while the Skarmory used Sand Attack. In spite of the accuracy drop, I went for Surf again and landed it. Finally it was Altaria. I switched back to Stomp and did less than half while the Altaria set up a Dragon Dance. Altaria was now faster and landed an Earthquake that did almost nothing. I went for Stomp and got a critical hit to finish the Altaria off. I was really surprised at how little a +1 Earthquake did to my Lickitung. Next was the Magma Hideout, and Maxie started with Mightyena. I went for Stomp and did less than half while the Mightyena used Scary Face. The Mightyena then used Swagger and I got confused. Luckily I broke through confusion and knocked the Mightyena out. Next was Crobat and I snapped out of confusion after only 1 turn. 2 Stomps took care of it. Finally was Camerupt. Camerupt is 4 times weak to water, so 1 Surf knocked out the Camerupt. Then I tried battling Tate and Liza. My strategy was to use Surf because it hits both of the opponent's Pokemon in double battles. I went for Surf and did almost nothing. I was hoping that Surf would do close to half to the Claydol, but it didn't even do a third. It took many turns to knock out the Claydol, and he had dealt a lot of damage by then. By the time Lunatone and Solrock were sent out, I barely had any health left. A few more attacks and I lost the fight. Clearly, Surf might not be the best strategy here. Okay, this time I taught Lickitung Shadow Ball for super effective damage on all their Pokemon. I also gave Lickitung the Citrus Berry to be able to restore HP during the fight. I started by targeting the Claydol first with Shadow Ball. Shadow Ball did significantly more damage than Surf was doing, and 2 Shadow Balls was enough to take the Claydol down. Meanwhile, the Xatu set up 1 Calm Mind and used a Psychic on the Magikarp. I then switched targets and nearly knocked the Xatu out. The Xatu used another Calm Mind, and the Lunatone started setting up its own Calm Minds. Tate and Liza healed the Xatu, but I landed a critical hit Shadow Ball and one-shot it. The Lunatone used another Calm Mind, which was concerning. I needed to take care of the Lunatone immediately, so I went for Shadow Ball, but did not one-shot it. The Lunatone lands a +2 Psychic and does massive damage. The Lunatone heals a little with the Citrus Berry, but I am faster, so 1 more Shadow Ball finishes the Lunatone off. Finally, Solrock remains, who had set up a sunny day. I went for Shadow Ball while the Solrocks targeted me with Solar Beam. My Shadow Ball does more damage, so I was able to 2-shot the Solrock and win the fight. I think we would have lost that fight if we did not land that critical hit against the Xatu. 1 more Team Aqua fight left, and Mightyena is the lead. I went for Stomp first and did half, but the Mightyena used Swagger. The next turn Archie heals and I hit myself in Confusion. Luckily, I snap out of Confusion after only 1 turn and knock out the Mightyena with Stomp. Crobat continues the trend and confuses me once again with Confuse Ray. I hurt myself in Confusion 2 times in a row while the Crobat lands a couple of attacks on me. I did end up breaking through Confusion and landing a Stomp and nearly knocked the Crobat out. The next turn Archie healed, but I snapped out of Confusion and finished the Crobat off. Finally was Sharpedo, who also knows Swagger. However, the Sharpedo used Taunt and I was able to one-shot it with Stomp. That was a surprisingly close fight. The final gym leader was simple until his ace, the Kingdra. The Kingdra kept using Double Team and I missed most of my moves. Even when I landed attacks, I would just get the Kingdra into Hyper Potion range and Juan would heal. My Stomp wasn't doing half to the Kingdra. I think I need a stronger move than Stomp at this point. I attempted the fight 3 times, but lost to the Kingdra every time. But, before changing my moveset, I tried the fight again. Like most attempts, the Kingdra started with Double Team. However, I hit my first Shadow Ball, then Kingdra used Double Team again, but I landed my Stomp and got a critical hit and knocked the Kingdra out. We didn't miss a single attack despite the Double Teams, and got a critical hit on top of that. That gym badge took a while, but we now have them all. Now it was time for the Elite Four. Sydney started with Mightyena, and I went straight for Brick Break and did about half. The Mightyena used Sand Attack and my accuracy was lowered. I missed my next Brick Break attempt, but landed my 3rd attempt and knocked the Mightyena out. Next was Shiftry and it started using Double Team. I missed my first Brick Break attempt, Shiftry set up a 2nd Double Team, but I hit my Brick Break attempt and did half. Sydney used Swagger the following turn, but I gave Lickitung a berry that cures Confusion. With the free attack boost, I knocked out the Shiftry. Cacturn was a one-shot with Brick Break, as was Crawdon. Last was Absol. I missed my first 2 Brick Break attempts due to the Sand Attack while the Absol set up a Swords Dance and landed a critical slash. Luckily, I didn't miss a 3rd time in a row and one-shot the Absol. Not too bad of a fight. Phoebe started with Dusclops and I got a critical hit Shadow Ball and one-shot it. I was worried about the Dusclops using Curse, so the critical hit was appreciated. Next was Banette, who nearly fell to a Shadow Ball but did minimal damage with Feint Attack. A couple more attacks finished the Banette off. For Sableye, I used Surf for the stronger base power and did just barely half. The Sableye used Feint Attack but did almost nothing. 1 more Surf finished it off. Next was another Banette and it was just as easy as the first one. Finally was Dusclops, who fell to 2 Shadow Balls. That fight was the easiest one so far. Glacia started with Celio and set up a Hail. My Brick Break did about half, but I was taking damage each turn from the Hail. Glalie was next and Brick Break once again did about half. The Glalie used Icy Wind and lowered my speed. Then, the Glalie was faster and did a lot of damage with Ice Beam before falling. Celio fell to 2 Brick Breaks, but another Glalie was next. I was weak from all the damage I took from our other Pokemon and the Hail, and the Glalie knocked me out with Ice Beam. I didn't even make it to her Ace. I tried a couple more times, but kept failing. Before re-attempting the fight, I gave Lickitung the Shell Bell. This item restores HP based on the amount of damage I deal with an attack. This will help counteract the damage taken from Hail. She started with Celio, who I was able to 2-shot with Thunderbolt. Next was Glalie, and I went for Brick Break and got a critical hit. I was able to one-shot it and avoid getting my speed lowered. The second Celio fell to 2 Thunderbolts, much like the first. Another Glalie was next, and 2 Brick Breaks take care of it. The Glalie did set up another Hail, but didn't deal any direct damage. Finally, I made it to the ace, the Wall Rain. I went for Thunderbolt and did way more damage than I was expecting. 1 more Thunderbolt and we knocked the Wall Rain out. That fight was definitely tough. Against Drake, the Shelgon and Altair were simple, and both fell to 1 Ice Beam. However, Kingdra was next and Shadow Ball was not doing much damage. The Kingdra set up a couple of Dragon Dances while I whittled down its HP. Then Drake healed and started using Body Slam and was dealing massive damage. I eventually fell to the Kingdra and lost the fight. The next attempt, Shelgon and Altaria went down just as easily, but next was Kingdra, and before the fight I replaced Shadow Ball with Return. I went for Return, hoping that it would do half, and ended up landing a critical hit. I one-shot his most difficult Pokemon for me. Flygon and Salamence are both 4 times weak to Ice, so they were both a one-shot with Ice Beam. One more fight left, but this champion fight might be kinda difficult. I attempted to fight the champion but kept failing. Oftentimes the Tentacruel would use Toxic, and at that point I would just lose the fight. Toxic does increasing damage after every turn, so in a couple turns I took so much damage. By the time I made it to the Milotic in some attempts, I was at range where just one Surf would knock me out. However, one attempt gave me some hope. First was Wailord, who fell to 2 returns like all my previous attempts. Next was Tentacruel, and it fell to 2 returns as well. It also did not use Toxic, which would have been an automatic loss. So far, nothing too out of the ordinary on this attempt. But then came Ludicolo, and I landed a critical hit return and one-shot it. My luck continued with Whiscash. I went for Return, and the Whiscash used Amnesia instead of attacking. Another return finished it off. Next was Gyarados, and I went for Thunderbolt. The Gyarados went for Dragon Dance instead of attacking. I knocked the Gyarados out without taking damage for the first time. Finally was Milotic. I went for Return since Milotic has worse physical defense compared to her special defense, and it did decent damage. The Milotic used Toxic and missed. The Milotic switched to Surf the following 2 turns, but I had just enough HP to live both of the Surfs, and I knocked the Milotic out with Return. I did not think I had a chance to win until the Gyarados didn't use an attacking move. I also got so lucky that Milotic used Toxic for the first turn instead of Surf. But we have now completed Pokemon Emerald with only a Lickitung. That run was interesting, as there were many easy fights and many fights that took a ton of attempts. But overall, another fun challenge, and I appreciate everyone watching the run.